In the annals of wildlife management, some stories stand out for their sheer audacity. This is one of those stories. Why would anyone in their right mind drop a beaver from an airplane? It seems absurd, doesn't it? It sounds like a punchline to a bizarre joke, something you'd hear in a tall tale. But believe it or not, it was a real, albeit unconventional, solution to a very real and pressing problem. A problem that threatened to unravel the delicate balance of an entire ecosystem. Picture this: a small, single-engine plane, buzzing like a determined insect, flying low over Idaho's rugged, seemingly endless backcountry. The landscape below is parched, a tapestry of browns and yellows stretching as far as the eye can see. Suddenly, a box tumbles from the plane's belly. A parachute bursts open, a splash of white against the vast open sky, slowing the box's descent. And inside that box, not supplies, not equipment, not even soldiers, but a living, breathing beaver, carefully packed and ready for its unexpected journey. The year is the 1940s. Idaho, like much of the American West, faced a complex environmental crisis. There were too many beavers causing problems in settled agricultural areas, their dams flooding fields and disrupting infrastructure. But simultaneously, there were not nearly enough beavers in the state's remote interior, where their absence was having devastating consequences. Vital streams, once teeming with life, were vanishing, drying up under the relentless sun. The land, stripped of its natural defenses, was eroding at an alarming rate, washing away precious topsoil. The delicate balance of the ecosystem was collapsing, threatening the entire region's long-term health and sustainability. Conservation officers desperately needed to relocate these beavers, moving them from areas of conflict to the areas where their dam-building skills could help restore the parched landscape and revitalize struggling waterways. But the terrain was a formidable obstacle, a vast and rugged wilderness that was nearly unreachable by traditional means. That's when someone, somewhere, had a truly wild idea. They proposed airdropping the beavers, parachuting them quite literally into the remote wilderness areas where they were needed most. And so the Idaho Fish and Game Department's Airborne Beaver Relocation Program was born, a daring experiment in wildlife management. It was a gamble, a roll of the dice with nature itself. Would the beavers survive the drop? Would they adapt to their new environment? Or would the whole thing fail spectacularly? Conservation isn't always a gentle, hands-off process. Sometimes it requires bold, unconventional action. Sometimes it means carefully packing a beaver into a box and parachuting it into a remote mountain basin. This wasn't just a quirky, one-off event, a strange footnote in the history of conservation. It was a pivotal moment, a turning point where humans recognized the power of nature's own engineers and enlisted their help in restoring a damaged landscape. The story of Idaho's paratrooping beavers is far more than just a historical oddity, a funny anecdote to trot out at parties. It's a powerful lesson in the intricate, often unexpected connections that bind a landscape together, the delicate web of life that sustains us all. It demonstrates that sometimes healing a damaged ecosystem requires extraordinary, even seemingly absurd measures, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the most effective solution to a complex environmental problem literally falls from the sky. The story starts on the ground, in a time of significant transformation. It was post-war Idaho, a period marked by expanding towns and farms, a landscape rapidly evolving to meet the needs of a growing population. Agriculture flourished, and suburban developments began to encroach upon the natural world. As civilization spread further and wider, carving its way into the wilderness, people increasingly clashed with a rebounding beaver population, a conflict born from competing interests and a misunderstanding of the beaver's crucial role in the ecosystem. Beavers, naturally inclined to engineer their environment, dammed irrigation ditches, disrupting the flow of water vital for agriculture. This led to flooded fields, turning fertile farmland into temporary lakes, much to the dismay of farmers. Their dams also blocked roads, impeding traffic and disrupting daily life. And they felled prized trees that held sentimental or economic value, transforming from a valued resource once prized for their fur to a perceived pest, a nuisance wildlife species to be managed or eradicated. Trapping was the old solution, the go-to method for dealing with unwanted beavers, but it was costly, both in terms of manpower and resources, and temporary, offering only a short-term fix to a long-term problem. Worse still, it was often fatal for the animals, a brutal consequence of human-wildlife conflict. However, conservationists and ecologists realized that despite the immediate problems, beavers were in fact vital for healthy ecosystems, playing a crucial role in maintaining biodiversity and creating essential wetland habitats. Despite this understanding, the conflict persisted, a complex issue with no easy answers. The real issue wasn't necessarily that there were too many beavers in the state, it was that they were concentrated in the wrong places, leading to localized conflicts and ecological imbalances. While the lowlands overflowed with beavers, their dams causing problems for agriculture and infrastructure, Idaho's remote backcountry, its vast and rugged wilderness, was comparatively barren, lacking the vital ecosystem services that beavers provide. Decades of overtrapping, driven by the lucrative fur trade, had left many mountain streams dry, unable to support the diverse aquatic life they once harbored. The stream banks were eroded, stripped of vegetation and stability. Without beaver dams to slow the flow of water, water rushed away downstream, carrying valuable topsoil and nutrients with it. Meadows dried up, turning brown and brittle under the summer sun, and wildlife suffered from the lack of water and habitat. The remaining streams warmed and shrank, becoming less hospitable to cold-water fish and other aquatic species. In some cases, they completely disappeared by late summer, leaving behind only dry stream beds as a stark reminder of the ecological damage. The problem was clear. The absence of beavers was having a devastating impact on Idaho's backcountry. Beavers were desperately needed where they were gone, to restore the natural balance and revitalize these degraded ecosystems. The solution? A seemingly simple yet remarkably effective idea: move them, relocate the beavers from areas of conflict to areas of need. Not just out of trouble, but up into the wild, into the remote and underpopulated backcountry where their ecosystem engineering skills were desperately needed. But how do you get a beaver, a semi-aquatic mammal, to the middle of nowhere, to those inaccessible and far-flung corners of Idaho's wilderness? The vast Idaho backcountry with its rugged mountains and sprawling forests presented a significant challenge. It was nearly inaccessible. No roads, just an endless expanse of wilderness, making traditional methods of transportation impractical. Early attempts to move beavers to these remote locations relied on mule-pack trains, a slow and arduous process. The journey was incredibly stressful for the beavers, who were not accustomed to being transported in such a manner. The mountainous terrain made the journey not only slow and stressful, but also dangerous for all involved, both the animals and their handlers. Accidents were a constant threat on those narrow, winding trails. Enter Elmo Hader, a resourceful conservation officer who drew inspiration from the innovative airborne logistics of World War II. He observed how the military efficiently delivered supplies to troops in remote areas using aircraft and parachutes. Witnessing the effectiveness of aerial supply drops, Hader posed a daring question. If you could drop supplies from a plane, why not a beaver? The idea, at first glance, sounded utterly crazy, a far-fetched notion that defied conventional wisdom. But upon closer inspection, it became clear that it was potentially the only viable way to reach the most remote basins, those inaccessible wilderness areas where beavers were desperately needed to restore ecosystems. Planes could cover vast distances in a matter of minutes, traversing terrain that would take days if not weeks to navigate by mule. This method allowed for precise placement of beavers exactly where they were needed, targeting specific streams and valleys to maximize their impact on the environment. The stress on the animals would be significantly minimized compared to the arduous mule journeys, and the overall costs of the relocation project would be slashed dramatically. With cautious approval from his superiors, Hader's dedicated team of engineers and conservationists began the challenging task of designing a safe and effective drop system. This wasn't a haphazard operation. It wasn't just about tossing a beaver unceremoniously out of a plane and hoping for the best. It required meticulous planning, innovative thinking, and careful engineering to ensure the safety and well-being of the animals. The design of the specialized box was paramount. It had to provide adequate protection for the beaver during the fall. It also needed to be lightweight enough to be effectively deployed with a parachute, ensuring a controlled descent. Crucially, the box had to be designed with a mechanism that would automatically open upon landing, allowing the beaver to quickly exit and begin its work. The success of the entire beaver relocation program and the restoration of countless ecosystems depended on getting this intricate design just right. The stage was set, the plans were drawn, and the moment of truth was fast approaching. The era of the beaver paratrooper was about to begin, a bold experiment in wildlife conservation. It was a combination of necessity born from the inaccessibility of the terrain, frustration with traditional methods, and a spark of genius that set this audacious plan in motion. Would this unconventional approach actually work? Would the beavers survive the drop and thrive in their new homes? There was only one way to find out: put the plan to the test and take to the skies. The operation hinged on a specially designed drop box. Hedder's team built a wooden crate, just big enough for a beaver or two, ventilated for air. The box's sides were hinged and held by an elastic cord, snapping open on impact. Surplus WE-2 cargo parachutes were attached for a gentle descent. Each package, beaver, box, parachute, was carefully weighed for a safe landing speed. On drop day, beavers were loaded into boxes at a local airfield. A small plane flew low over remote meadows, the beaver dropper pushing crates out the door. The parachute deployed, and the beaver floated down. The pilot circled to confirm a safe landing and box release. Drops were always near water, giving beavers a head start. Precision and planning were everything, there was no room for error. The first flight was tense. No one knew if the beavers would survive. Would the parachute work? Would the box open? The stakes were high. For the beavers, it was bewildering. Darkness, engine noise, a sudden drop, then floating through the sky. The team worried about stress and injury, but trusted in the animal's resilience. Pilots had to fly low enough for accuracy, high enough for parachute deployment. Wind could send a beaver off course, so every drop was a calculated risk. The moment of truth was the landing. The box had to open, the beaver had to emerge, and the plan had to work. As the first crates drifted down, everyone held their breath. This was a delicate dance between gravity, mechanics, and animal instinct. Success or failure would be decided in seconds. The fate of the project and the landscape hung in the balance. Would beavers become Idaho's airborne saviors? The first test subject was Geronimo, a hardy, calm beaver. Loaded into his crate, he was dropped over the wilderness as observers watched anxiously. The parachute opened, the box landed, and after a tense pause, Geronimo emerged, unharmed and purposeful. He waddled straight to the stream and dove in. The test was a triumph, and the program was launched. Over the project, 76 beavers were dropped, 75 survived. Only one perished, jumping out too soon. The success rate, nearly 99%, was a testament to careful design and execution. Planes could now populate entire watersheds in hours, not days. The beavers quickly got to work, building dams and transforming the landscape. The airborne delivery system revolutionized wildlife relocation. Sometimes the wildest ideas work best. The real magic began after landing. The beavers set to work, building dams and ponds that transformed the landscape. Water slowed, ponds formed, and streams that once dried up now flowed year-round. The land rehydrated, meadows turned green, and new wetlands flourished. Willows, sedges, and other plants thrived, creating lush corridors. These changes attracted trout, waterfowl, moose, and songbirds. The beaver ponds became biodiversity hotspots, oases in the arid wild. The initial goal was just to move problem animals. The outcome was a dramatic ecological restoration. Beavers proved to be keystone species, triggering a cascade of life. The landscape was visibly reborn. Idaho's paratrooping beavers didn't just survive, they healed the land. Sometimes the best engineers have fur and flat tails. The legacy of Operation Beaver Drop is written in Idaho's ponds and streams. The beaver colonies grew, creating a network of wetlands that still shape the region. These wetlands store water, buffer against drought, and filter pollutants. They improve water quality and provide natural fire breaks during wildfires. The story became a model for modern conservation. Today, beaver reintroduction is a celebrated restoration strategy worldwide. The quirky 1940s experiment sparked a global movement. It taught us that nature often holds the best solutions. Sometimes letting wildlife do its job is the smartest move. The beaver paratrooper's legacy is a living, thriving landscape, and a lesson in ecological humility. Idaho's parachuting beavers force us to see the wild world differently. What began as conflict ended in partnership and healing. The beaver wasn't the problem, it was the missing piece. This story is a parable for today's environmental challenges. Sometimes the best solutions are natural, not technological. Reintroducing keystone species can restore entire ecosystems. The airborne beavers remind us of the power of systems thinking. Healthy ecosystems are our best defense against climate change. The lesson nature's wisdom is often the answer. How many other solutions are simply in the wrong place waiting to fall from the sky?